Hey there, and welcome back to Build Explain. If you're new to the Build and Chill series, click the link in the top right to start part 1. Even some of you veteran players might be surprised to learn something new from the breakdown of Valheim's building mechanics. Last week in part 2, we went over the intricacies of using basic wood to add detail and character to our build, and how to furnish our new home using resources available without leaving the meadows. In this video, we're going to have to adventure out of that comfort zone, and we'll even need to advance to the Bronze Age to complete our build the way we planned it. So, if you're experiencing Valheim for the first time, and want to experience the full game for yourself, I highly recommend pausing the video now and coming back after advancing the world a bit to avoid spoilers. With that out of the way, let's discuss the first topic of the day, core wood. Shout out again to the Valheim wiki for most of this information. You can find them in the link in the description below. Like regular wood, it weighs 2 pounds per piece, can stack up to 50, has a durability health bar of 400, the same resistance ratings, and is also susceptible to rain damage without a proper roof. But where core wood structures differ is their maximum support and vertical and horizontal loss values. Core wood has a max support of 140, which is 40 more than basic wood, and has a 1/10 vertical loss and a 1/6 horizontal loss versus basic wood's vertical 1/8 and horizontal 1/5 losses. This means that core wood structures can be used as superior support beams to allow for taller and wider wooden structures, and opens up a plethora of building possibilities. Core wood is primarily used for wooden support beams found in our typical variants, such as 2 and 4 meter vertical and horizontal beams, and 26 and 45 degree angle beams. And like most resources in Valheim, is also used in a wide variety of crafting recipes. Something a lot of players don't know though, is that core wood is actually accessible to you without ever even beating the first boss. It's farmed in the Black Forest from pine trees, and unlike oak or birch, they only require a stone axe to chop them down. So as long as you're willing to make a slightly undergeared adventure into the Black Forest, you can actually start your playthrough with some pretty decent build pieces. After braving the Black Forest for one of the first times, and have a decent inventory of core wood, let's get to building our long-awaited balcony. First, let's destroy the roofs we placed where the open balcony is supposed to be. This will give us an obvious visual of where our supports need to go. Next, we're going to destroy and recycle the wooden support beams that we used for aesthetics previously. Don't worry, unless you have some beams that are standalone structures like the supports on my porches, these never actually added any support, so we shouldn't see any pre-existing pieces collapsing while we break them. For this particular build, we're using the absolute most of our vertical height limit, so our core wood beam placement needs to be perfect. We'll do this by switching our snapping option to bottom. This ensures that we will snap the beam to the bottom of the structure rather than the ground, wasting precious height. Place 4 meter beams under the 4 corners of the balcony, and make sure that each beam is showing a blue color, meaning that they are grounded. If a beam is showing green, don't worry. All you need to do is use the level or raise ground function of the hoe to bring the earth up to the beam. Now that we have the basic foundation set up, we'll continue to place core beams vertically until we have a 3 meter excess above the balcony floor. Since core wood beams only come in 2 or 4 meter variants, if your build is slightly different from mine, you may need to offset the beam by 1 meter. You can do this by setting up your balcony's railing, which is going to be a vertical 1 meter wood beam, closed in by 2 meter horizontal beams, giving us a 1 meter snapping point for the next core wood placement. Once the railing is complete, we can change our snapping option back to bottom and snap the next 2 meter core wood beams to the height of the railing. You've probably noticed several times by now that the wood crosses from the last episode are still protruding from the floor. It's time to fix that. We'll destroy the visible row and replace them in line with the rest of the house. Now that the initial support system is set up, let's get to building. The first thing I like to do when building with support beams like core wood is to construct the frame and shape of the build first. This saves us some time and headache in the future if it turns out our build isn't going to work the way we want it to. We're going to be keeping the rounded roof effect by using 45-degree angles for our first rows, and switching back to 26 degrees for the remainder of the roof until they meet in the middle. Now that the framing is down, let's fill it in with the appropriate roof pieces. You could leave the balcony open and leave plenty of open space for visibility, but I think I prefer building up the walls and closing in the sides, which I'll do now. And here's the finished look at the balcony that we put off for 2 weeks. While by itself it isn't the craziest addition ever, but you'll probably agree that it adds a ton of personality to the build overall. Pretty soon we're going to need to adventure to the Black Forest fairly often, and the best way to do that is by boat. Which means I want to build a dock. It's not necessary because obviously we can just park the boat on the shore, but man is it convenient to run straight inside the house with our loot without even touching the shore. I'm going to start by building out 2 floors, then adding stairs downward until they're fairly close to the water. If you didn't know, Valheim does have low and high tides, so when building your bottom platform, make sure you place it to the height of the low tide. This will allow us to have somewhere to disembark regardless of the water's level. Then we'll add one more layer of floors out from the stairs to give us a nice platform. Once done, we'll need to add our core wood beams to allow enough support for a roof. I like to start by placing the beams in the furthest corners from the shore while using the top snapping option. Then, I'll place a few more beams around every 2 floors. If you happen to run into a scenario where your beams don't quite reach the ocean floor, you can remedy this by toggling the snapping options to top, and then looking at the bottom of the first beam you placed. It should snap to your next beam at the bottom and clip the rest of it underground. Rotate the camera and check your work. Once we've finished the supports for the dock itself, we need to figure out what height we want the roof to be. Personally, I want mine to be even with the railing of the balcony above. I think it gives it a bit more cohesiveness to the overall look of the build, while also giving enough verticality to prevent the dock from feeling claustrophobic. And since the dock is an odd number of floors wide, we'll need to use a roof ridge as our centerpiece. Place the remainder of the first row of roofs, and now we know exactly what height the beams need to be in order to support the roof. As it turns out, a 4-meter beam on the second row next to the stairs is the perfect level for what we need. To make things easier on myself, I'm going to use horizontal beams to frame out the rest. Now that we have a good snapping reference point for the other beams that have an odd height, we can simply snap 4-meter beams using this top snapping alignment once again. And with the framing finished, let's fill in the roof. With that completed, we can add some 26-degree beams to the end to complete our framing. If your dock is an uneven number of floors wide, simply allow the beams to cross and use your best judgment on placement. It's okay if you don't get it just right the first time. Next, let's fill in the gap between the framing and the roof. All that's left now is to make the dock match the aesthetic of the rest of the build by adding wood crosses to the bottom and making safety railings around the sides. As much as I love the way this is coming together, there's one last thing I want to do. I want to replace all the regular wood support beams with core wood beams. Now, this is by no means necessary for the build. If you're happy with the way it looks now, feel free to skip this step, but I'll go ahead and show you the finished results so you can decide which version looks best to you. And with that, we've finally finished the external part of this build, at least with what we can do while we stay in the Stone Age. Truth be told, there's actually one more variant of wood we can find in the meadows, but we're gonna have to explore the Black Forest more than ever before to obtain it. If you haven't progressed this far in Valheim before, this is your last chance. Seriously, pause the video, beat the meadows, progress a bit through the Black Forest and come back. All of this game's charm is about experiencing the unlocks and biome features for yourself. If I could go back 3 years and experience it all for the first time again, I would. That being said, if you already know what lies in wait, I'm going to skip the next several hours of gameplay and cut right back to the building and crafting. By this point in the build, you will have needed to explore most of what the Black Forest has to offer, such as tombs, troll caves, gathered flint and ores, and encountered an excessive amount of grey dwarfs, and hopefully use some of the tricks I taught in part 1 to make your life a bit easier. All this adventuring will have given us enough materials to build our first forge, and plenty of ores to refine. Before we place anything down, let's scout out a good spot near our house that can be leveled down and doesn't interfere with the current design. Personally, I really like this area off to the west side of the house. Let's use our hoe to flatten down the area and place down our kiln and smelter. If you only have enough Surtling cores for a single structure, don't worry. You can simply build up an excess supply of coal from the kiln and then break it down and recycle the cores to build a smelter. For whatever reason, Greylings absolutely love attacking these things, so I'm going to add some temporary defense walls to keep everything safe. Once done, unload some of your excess wood into the kiln for coal and start loading your smelter with ore. We're going to need at least 12 pieces of bronze to complete the next steps, so we're going to need 24 copper ingots, 12 tin ingots, and 6 additional copper ingots for our forged workbench. Once all of your ore is smelted, place the new shiny forged workbench down and craft the pinnacle item of the wood section of this series, a bronze axe. Not only can it be used as a weapon, but we can finally cut down birch and oak trees. But not that one. That one looks cool. Now that you hacked your way through your first hardwood tree, you can finally reap the rewards of your hours of gameplay. Fine wood. Sadly, fine wood doesn't have any important stats to obsess over, because it isn't used for building structures. So why do we care then? Because fine wood is not only used for higher tier weapons, but is also used for making furniture, boats, and portals. Last few things we need to finish our build entirely, so let's get to work. The first thing I want to build with our newly found material is going to be the Carve. While it's not the biggest or fastest boat in the game, it beats running and is vastly superior to the raft. It's also extremely useful in the fact that we could use this storage container to transport 4 stacks of anything of our choosing. Meaning if we need to go resupply on materials from now on, we have a faster mode of transportation and we have extra weight that we can carry. Next, let's finish our interior decorating by placing down some furniture. A couple of chairs and a table would look great in the kitchen. And a few benches around the house would also do nicely. And we can't forget the porches and balcony. I enjoy putting chairs and benches here to act as patio furniture. But one thing I don't see being used enough is item stands. With a few extra nails and a bit more fine wood, these little squares can bring your entire build to life. Use the horizontal types on your tables, and then add some of your favorite cooked foods to your hotbar. Place them on the stand, and suddenly you have an actual table setting for your kitchen. This trick is great for setting up cinematics or just adding a little bit of immersion to your server. So far, we've built something even I am proud of. This entire build was constructed using only 2 biomes worth of material, without even leaving the starting island. And we only have one last thing to add: portals. But I don't want to just throw our portals anywhere, so next week we're going to construct our first external buildings. So if you've enjoyed what you've learned today, or just hung around to use my videos as background noise, leave a like and be sure to subscribe to get notified for the next video. And if you're interested in something specific about Valheim, or have a suggestion for the next build and chill, leave a comment below.